Hi, I'm Aaron Smith, and I just replaced the alternator on a 2004 Chevy all-wheel drive Astro van that has the 4.3 engine in it. And when I was putting the alternator in, I broke the alternator bracket, mounting bracket. It's made out of white metal, and it breaks pretty easy when you try to free the alternator from the bracket. It's made out of white metal, and it kind of seizes in there, kind of gets pressed in there because they use this steel sleeve that is forced back against the alternator when you tighten it up. And if you watched the previous video, I talked about that a little bit on how to replace an alternator and a mounting bracket on a 2004 Chevy Astro van. Now this is a all-wheel drive, power steering. It has air conditioning. And what we're going to do is I'm going to put the serpentine belt back on, and hopefully this will give you an idea of how the serpentine belt is ran on the engine. Hello, I'm Aaron Smith, and I'm replacing an alternator on a 2004 Chevy Astro van. And the problem that I ran into was that when I went to take the alternator off, what happened was the alternator, this is a new one, the alternator bearing locked up, and when that seized, the belt tore, and I needed to replace the alternator. When I went to replace the alternator, to take that off, there's two bolts. You got one here and you got one here, but the problem is when you loosen that, the alternator just doesn't want to pull out of that. There's the only two bolts you have that mount the alternator to the alternator bracket. You have a wire back here in the back connected right there, and then you have a wire back here in the back you need to take off with a screw, and then down here on the side of the bracket there's a wiring harness that gets bolted to the side of the mount. There, I think you can see it. You need to take them off to pull the alternator off, but when you go to pull this off, it gets seized in there and it doesn't want to come out of the bracket. It doesn't want to move freely. So what I did was I tried to pry the alternator, break it loose by putting a pry bar in there and prying it up, and when I did, this ear broke off. It's white metal. It's cheap for the auto manufacturers to use. Here's the old bracket. You can see that right here, this was the ear. It broke off when I tried to pull the alternator out, and I think the reason that it does that is because what GM did was they cast this thing, and then the alternator sits down in here and you run your bolt through, but these steel sleeves here, when you tighten the bolt up, it pushes against the alternator and it almost fits it in there, and you just can't pull it out. It doesn't come out easier. I think what they did was they tried to save themselves a couple dollars. Instead of making this casting thicker here with a boss, they put these cheap steel bushings in, and then you got that alternator against here, and you can see it kind of mars the casting, and it just doesn't want to come out of there. So you almost got to pry it out somehow, and when you do, you could end up breaking the tab like I did. So I ended up needing to replace this bracket, which cost $50 to replace. And then since the belt, GM had another bright idea, and I think most of the car manufacturers are probably doing it, but this tensioner pulley is made out of plastic. So when that alternator belt locked up because of the bearing going bad in the alternator, it wanted to spin and melt the plastic pulley. On there you can see how the grooves are all melted, so the belt won't fit in there. This is what it's supposed to look like, and this is what the a hot spinning belt does to a piece of plastic. So another bad idea. Put a plastic pulley on a motor that spins a few thousand RPMs a minute. I guess it works till you get an issue. But in order to take this bracket off, I had to actually, my dad was helping me work on this. He had to take off the shroud, the fan shroud, and I had to tear off the air box. We saw on the internet that you had to pull out the dog box inside the vehicle, since it's a van, to get to the back. The rumor on the internet was there was a third bolt in the back. The only way you could get it was through the dog box. That's not true. There's only two bolts that bolt that on again. One is right here and one is right here. But in order to get the mounting bracket off, there's three bolts that do that. You got one right here. That's actually a nut. It's actually a nut on a stud there on this one. And then underneath here you have another bolt, and then you have a bolt right there. And them two bolts and that one nut for that stud is the ones you have to loosen to get this bracket off, the alternator bracket. Now the tensioner pulley actually mounts right here. That's where the tensioner pulley mounts. And then you have your idler pulley here on the top. So that's what's involved with replacing an alternator. And there's one more bolt that I may have forgot to tell you about. It's this bolt right here. When you're taking off the, you can see it right here. When you're taking off this alternator bracket, mounting bracket, there is one more bolt. It's right there, and that goes to a bracket that goes on top of the air conditioner pump. It's kind of hard to see the whole thing here. Oh, there it is. And I could get that bracket runs from the top of your alternator mounting bracket to the top of your air conditioner. And when you go to take the alternator bracket off, I told you that there's 3 bolts, and there's 2 bolts and a stud with a nut on it. There's a bolt on the side of the alternator down in there for your wiring harness. Here's your wire back here. You have to take the clip off and pull out. And then there's a bolt on the back side for a wire. But I think originally I forgot to tell you about this bolt here. You got to take that off too. Now you have your alternator pulley here. You have your tensioner pulley down here. Let's see if you can see that right here. Coming up right across, you have a idler pulley. You have your air compressor pulley right here. And then right down below that you have your power steering pulley, I believe. And then you have your water pump pulley. And then down here on the very bottom, directly underneath that water pump pulley, is your crank pulley. Down here on the bottom, I can't really get my hand in there to point to it. Maybe. I don't know if you can see my hand down there or not, but there's my finger down there at the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this belt on, and then hopefully give you a picture of what it looks like once it's on. So if you have to replace your belt and you don't know how to put it back on. Hopefully when I get this back on, you'll see how it's ran to help you out in the future. Now generally whenever you are replacing an alternator belt or a serpentine belt, what you want to look for is the grooves here on the inside of the belt and the smooth surface on the outside of the belt. The grooves generally go in pulleys that have a groove. The grooves in the belt generally go on a pulley that has grooves in. And the smooth surface of the belt generally goes on pulleys that are smooth like this. So what you end up wanting to do is put your belt on with the grooves of the belt going down into the pulley that has the grooves on, and the smooth side of the belt you want on a smooth pulley. So that'll help you find how it S's between. See, the grooved pulley, the belt grooves go in the groove pulley, and then the smooth side go against the smooth pulley. So essentially what you have here is you have the alternator pulley, the idler pulley, the air conditioner pulley, the power steering pump pulley, the water pump pulley, the crankshaft pulley, and the tensioner pulley. And basically how this thing runs is the belt comes on top of the alternator, below the idler pulley, around the top of the air conditioner pulley, below the power steering pulley, around the water pump pulley, down below the crankshaft pulley, up to the back side of the tensioner pulley, and to the top of the alternator pulley. So that's how the belts ran on a 2004 Chevy Astro van, 4.3 all-wheel drive with air conditioning, power steering. So that's what's involved with replacing an alternator and an alternator bracket. And of course the serpentine belt on a 2004 Chevy Astro van. I didn't think about recording this as we were tearing it apart, but I thought at this point I could show people that never done it and was wondering what all was involved, what they would need to do to replace that. So there you have it. We're going to put everything back together now, but to save you some maybe heartache or frustration in the future and keep you from ripping the dog box out to replace this. It's a 2004 Chevy Astro van with a 4.3 engine in it. It's all-wheel drive and it has air conditioning, but all them pulleys and everything are over here on the other side. The only thing on this side is your alternator, your tensioner, and your idler pulley. So there you have it. That's what you'll need to get into. Have a good day.